Grandpa," my 8-year-old granddaughter whispered. "After the party, Mom and Dad are going to take your money." I left with a smile. What I did next stunned them all. The smell of old wood and lemon polish. That's the first thing I notice every morning. It's the smell of my house, the one Helen and I bought 52 years ago. It's the smell of my life, I suppose. The sun was just starting to filter through the big maple tree outside the kitchen window, dappling the worn linoleum floor in soft, moving patches of light. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the cool Formica countertop, just breathing it in. Some days, the silence of the house is a comfort, a warm blanket. Other days, it's a weight. Today, it was just there. A fact like the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound so constant, I only ever noticed it when it stopped. My routine is simple. It's the scaffolding that holds my days together now that Helen is gone. First, the coffee. A simple drip machine, nothing fancy. I measure out the grounds, the same way I have for 30 years, fill the reservoir with water, and flip the switch. While it gurgles and sputters to life, I walk through the downstairs. I check the front door, already knowing it's locked. I run a hand over the dusty surface of the piano Helen used to play. In my mind, I can still hear her fumbling through a simple tune, laughing when she hit a wrong note. It's a ghost of a sound, but a welcome one. I took my coffee, black, to the old leather armchair in the living room. The leather is cracked and faded, molded perfectly to the shape of my body over thousands of hours of sitting, reading, thinking, and just being. The newspaper was on the ottoman where the delivery kid always leaves it. I unfolded it, the rustle of the paper loud in the quiet room. But I didn't read. I just stared at the headlines, my mind drifting. My 80th birthday was in 2 days. 80? The number felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Some old fella. Not me, Arthur. Not the man who built this house's extension with his own 2 hands, who could still change a tire faster than his own son, Mark. The phone rang, its shrill cry cutting through the morning peace. It was Sarah, my daughter-in-law. Her voice was like honey, thick and sweet. A little too sweet sometimes. "Arthur, good morning. I didn't wake you, did I?" "Morning, Sarah." "No, I've been up for a while," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "Oh, good. I was just calling about the party. Everything is set for Saturday. We've got the caterer confirmed. The big tent for the backyard is being delivered tomorrow. It's going to be wonderful. You deserve it." I made a non-committal noise. "You and Mark shouldn't have gone to all this trouble." "Nonsense. It's your 80th. We have to celebrate the best dad and grandpa in the world," she chirped. There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background, some morning show. I was actually hoping you could do me a tiny favor, though. I have to pick up the cake on Saturday morning, and my car's been making a funny noise. You know how Mark worries. I was wondering if I could borrow your car, the old Buick? It's just for a couple of hours. The Buick. My Buick. It was a 1998 LeSabre, a boat of a car, but it ran like a top. Helen and I took that car on our last big road trip down to the Carolinas. It had less than 70,000 miles on it. I kept it in pristine condition. "I suppose so," I said slowly. "When would you need it?" "Oh, you're a lifesaver. Could I just swing by and grab the keys tomorrow, Friday sometime? That way I can get an early start on Saturday without bothering you." Something about it felt off. Just a little. They had 2 cars. Mark's was a fancy new SUV that cost more than my first house. Sarah's was only a few years old. A funny noise seemed like a thin excuse. But I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. They were trying to do something nice for me. The least I could do was lend them a car. All right, Sarah. Come by tomorrow afternoon. You're the best, Arthur. Lily is so excited for your party. She's been making you a special card all week. We'll see you tomorrow. She hung up, and the silence rushed back in. I finished my coffee, the warmth spreading through my chest. But it didn't quite chase away the little chill that had settled there. I spent the rest of the day in my workshop out back. The smell of sawdust and machine oil always cleared my head. I was carving a small bluebird for my granddaughter, Lily. She loved them. As I worked the wood, sanding the edges smooth, I thought about Mark and Sarah. They were good kids, mostly. Mark was a financial advisor, or something like that. He used fancy words I didn't always understand. They lived in a big new house in a gated community, the kind where all the houses looked the same. They always seemed to be striving for something. More, bigger, better. I remembered when Mark was a boy. He used to follow me around this very workshop, his eyes wide with wonder. I taught him how to use a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once. He was a quick learner. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost interest in making things with his hands. He'd become interested in making money instead. Nothing wrong with that, I told myself. A man has to provide for his family. Still, there were little things. A few months ago, they'd helped me set up online banking. "It's so much easier, Dad," Mark had said, his fingers flying across the tablet screen. "You can see all your accounts in one place." I didn't like it. I liked paper statements. I liked walking into the bank and talking to a teller. But I'd agreed, not wanting to seem like a stubborn old fool. They were just trying to help, weren't they? That evening, I was cleaning up the kitchen when I saw a letter on the counter, tucked under a grocery store flyer. It must have fallen out of Sarah's purse when she was over last week. It was from a credit card company, a bright red envelope marked "Final Notice." I shouldn't have looked. It wasn't my business. But I did. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the statement. The amount due made me catch my breath. It was a staggering number. More than I made in a whole year back when I was working. My heart started to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. I placed it back under the flyer, exactly as I'd found it. But the image of that number was burned into my mind. I thought of Sarah's honey-sweet voice on the phone, the fancy SUV, the big house, the elaborate party they were throwing for me. A party for me, or a party to show everyone else how successful they were. The little chill I'd felt that morning returned, colder this time, and it settled deep in my bones. I went to bed that night, feeling for the first time in a long time, truly old, and a little afraid. The next day, Friday, passed in a haze of anxiety. I tried to keep to my routine, but my mind kept replaying things, snippets of conversations, odd requests, them asking, casually, about the title to the house. "Just in case, Dad. For estate planning." Them offering to consolidate my investment accounts for me, to maximize the returns. At the time, I'd been touched by their concern. Now, it all seemed to have a different color, a darker shade. Sarah arrived around 3 o'clock, right on schedule. She gave me a quick, airy hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "Arthur, you're looking dapper today," she said, her eyes scanning the living room. "Are you getting excited for tomorrow?" "As excited as an 80-year-old can be," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh, you're not a day over 60. She laughed, a practiced tinkling sound. "Did you have the keys for me?" I handed them to her. The familiar weight of the Buick keys, with the little leather fob Helen had bought me, felt strange leaving my palm. Her fingers, cool and manicured, closed around them. "Perfect. This is a huge help. I'll have it back in your driveway by Saturday afternoon, full tank of gas," she promised. "Mark and Lily will be over around 4 to help you get ready for the party." "That's fine," I said. She paused at the door. "You know, Dad, Mark and I were talking. We worry about you all alone in this big house, with your savings and everything. We think we've come up with a really great plan to make sure you're secure. For the future. We want to talk to you about it at the party after all the guests leave. Just us. A family chat." A great plan. My blood ran cold. The final notice. The talk about estate planning. It was all starting to connect, forming a picture I didn't want to see. "A plan?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "A wonderful one," she said, her smile bright and wide. It didn't reach her eyes. "You'll see. It will be a huge weight off your shoulders. Trust me." She left, and I stood by the window, watching my Buick, my car, us, pull away from the curb and disappear down the street. "Trust me," she'd said. And in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that was as solid and heavy as a block of granite in my stomach, that I couldn't. The scaffolding of my life, my simple, quiet routine, was starting to groan and splinter. And I had a terrible feeling that the whole thing was about to come crashing down. Saturday arrived not with the gentle dawn light I was used to, but with a sense of impending collision. The air in the house felt thick, charged. It was the day of my 80th birthday party, and the dread I'd been trying to suppress had bloomed into a full-blown, thorny bush in my chest. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a countdown. I went through the motions of my morning. Coffee, newspaper, staring out the window. But nothing was the same. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a stage, waiting for the actors to arrive and the final, tragic act to begin. I thought about Helen. I thought about what she would do. She was always the shrewd one, the one who could read people. She would have seen this coming a mile away. She wouldn't have let it get this far. "Arthur," she would have said, her voice firm but loving. "You see the good in everyone, even when it's not there. You need to open your eyes." I felt a pang of shame, a deep-seated feeling of failure. I had let my guard down. I had wanted to believe in the pretty picture my son and his wife had painted, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. Around noon, a big white truck pulled up, and 2 men started unloading a massive tent and setting it up in the backyard. It was an ostentatious thing, far too grand for my little patch of grass. Then came the tables, the chairs, the strings of lights. It was a production. Sarah had spared no expense. Or rather, she had spared no one else's expense, I thought grimly, the image of that red final notice flashing in my mind. Was this party being paid for with credit, with borrowed money they didn't have? Was it all a performance designed to impress their friends and ultimately to soften me up for this wonderful plan they had for me? At 4 o'clock, just as Sarah had said, Mark and Lily arrived. Mark was wearing a crisp polo shirt and expensive-looking slacks. He clapped me on the back, a hearty, hollow gesture. "Happy birthday, Dad. 80 years young, how does it feel?" "Feels the same as 79, I grumbled, trying to sound like my usual self. "We're going to have a great time tonight. All our friends are so excited to celebrate with you." he said. He glanced around. Wow, the tent looks great, doesn't it? Sarah really outdid herself. Our friends, not my friends. I had a few old buddies from the plant, but most of them were gone now or couldn't get around easily. I knew this guest list would be filled with Mark and Sarah's crowd. Other financial guys, women in designer clothes, people who would talk about stock portfolios and vacation homes in places I'd only ever seen in magazines. But then there was Lily. She ran past her father and threw her arms around my legs, burying her face in my trousers. She was the one pure, uncomplicated thing in my life. I rested my hand on her head, her hair fine as silk. "Happy birthday, Grandpa," she mumbled into my leg. I crouched down, wincing a little as my old knees complained. I looked into her face. She had Helen's eyes, big, brown, and honest. "Thank you, sweet pea. Did you bring that special card you made for me?" She nodded solemnly, pulling a folded piece of construction paper from the pocket of her dress. It was covered in crayon drawings of birds, a lopsided cake with 8 candles, and a picture of the 2 of us holding hands. In wobbly letters, it said, "I love you, Grandpa." My throat tightened. This was real. This love was real. It was the only thing I was sure of anymore. "It's the best card I've ever gotten," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of crayons and that innocent little kid smell. For a moment, holding her, the thorny bush in my chest receded. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Sarah arrived, my Buick pulling silently into the driveway. She came in carrying a ridiculously large and ornate cake. She was flushed with excitement, directing Mark to move furniture, telling me which shirt to wear. I felt like a doll being dressed up for a show. I moved where they told me to move. I nodded when they spoke to me, but my mind was elsewhere. I was watching them. I watched the way they communicated with quick, knowing glances when they thought I wasn't looking. I saw the way Mark's hand tightened on his phone when it buzzed, a flicker of panic in his eyes before he smoothed it over with a smile. The guests started to arrive around 6. Just as I'd suspected, it was a sea of unfamiliar, smiling faces. They all shook my hand, wished me a happy birthday, and told me how wonderful it was that my son and daughter-in-law were throwing me such a lavish party. "They just adore you," one woman said, patting my arm. I smiled and nodded, the muscles in my face feeling stiff and unnatural. I circulated, a glass of sparkling cider in my hand, feeling like a ghost at my own feast. The air was filled with loud chatter, music I didn't recognize, and the clinking of glasses. Mark and Sarah were in their element, flitting from group to group, laughing, accepting compliments on the party, on their home, on their generosity. They were playing the part of the perfect, devoted children, and they were playing it well. I found a quiet corner on the edge of the patio, near the rose bushes Helen had planted. The scent of the roses was a comfort, a link to a time when things were simpler, when love didn't have to be questioned. I watched my family. Mark was telling some animated story to a group of men, his hands gesturing wildly. Sarah was showing off the cake to some women, her laughter bright and brittle. And Lily was sitting by herself on the back steps, tracing patterns on the concrete with her finger, looking small and lost in the chaos. My heart went out to her. This wasn't a party for an 80-year-old man. And it certainly wasn't a party for an 8-year-old girl. It was for the people in the middle, the ones who seemed to need the noise and the spectacle to feel like they were alive, like they were successful. I walked over and sat down on the step next to her. She looked up at me, her expression serious. "Are you having fun, Grandpa?" she asked quietly. "I'm having more fun sitting here with you than anywhere else," I said honestly. We sat in silence for a few minutes, an island of quiet in the middle of the storm of celebration. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The caterers were bringing out trays of food that smelled delicious, but I had no appetite. My stomach was a knot of tension. I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the party to end, for the guests to leave, for the family chat that Sarah had promised. Lily leaned her head against my arm. Her little body felt so warm and trusting. The contrast between her simple, honest affection and the calculated performance of her parents was a physical pain. How could two people create something so pure and then become so tangled? The party wore on. There were toasts. Mark gave a long, rambling speech about what a great role model I'd been, how I'd taught him the value of hard work. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. People applauded. I smiled weakly. I just wanted it to be over. Finally, people started to leave. The goodbyes were a long, drawn-out process. More handshakes, more compliments. By 11 o'clock, the last car had pulled away. The caterers had packed up their things, leaving behind only bags of trash and the big, empty tent, which looked like a ghostly skeleton in the dim light from the house. Silence descended. It was a different kind of silence than the one that usually filled my house. This one was heavy, expectant. Mark, Sarah, Lily, and I were left in the living room. The air was stale with a lingering scent of perfume and food. "Well," Mark said, rubbing his hands together, "that was a success." "It was a lovely party, dear," Sarah said, starting to tidy up some stray napkins. "Lily, honey, it's late. Why don't you go upstairs to the guest room and get ready for bed? Mommy and Daddy need to talk to Grandpa for a little bit." Lily looked from her mother to me, her eyes wide. She stood up and came over to give me a hug goodnight, her arms wrapped tightly around my neck. And then she whispered the words that would ignite the smoldering fire of my suspicion into a raging inferno. Her breath was warm against my ear, her voice a tiny, frightened whisper. "Grandpa," she said, her voice barely audible. "After the party, Mom and Dad are going to take your money." She pulled back and looked at me, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. She had heard something she wasn't supposed to hear, something that had scared her enough to break the rules and tell me. My heart stopped. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I looked over her small head at Mark and Sarah, who were whispering to each other by the fireplace, a low, urgent murmur. They looked up and saw me watching them. Sarah gave me a tight, bright smile. I hugged Lily back, holding her for a dear, long moment. I needed to let her know she'd done the right thing, that I wasn't mad, that I understood. I managed to compose my face, to force a smile that I hoped looked grandfatherly and reassuring. I had to protect her. I couldn't let them know she had warned me. "You get some sleep, sweet pea," I whispered back to her. "Everything is going to be all right." She nodded and scurried out of the room and up the stairs. I stood up, my joints aching, my mind a whirlwind. I left with a smile on my face, a calm, gentle smile that was the greatest lie I had ever told. I walked towards my son and daughter-in-law, who were now turning to face me, their expressions arranged into masks of loving concern. The final act was about to begin. But what they didn't know was that their littlest actor had just rewritten the script. And what I did next stunned them all. The smile felt like a piece of plaster hardening on my face. It was a strange, disconnected thing, a mask I was holding up with sheer force of will. Inside, a storm was raging. Lily's words echoed in my head, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. Take your money, take your money, take your money. The blood was roaring in my ears, so loudly I could barely hear what Mark was saying. Dad, why don't you have a seat? He said, gesturing to my leather armchair. My chair. He was ushering me into my own chair, as if he were the host and I were the guest. The casual ownership of the gesture was like a tiny jab to the ribs. Sarah, maybe get Dad a glass of water? Of course, she said, her voice smooth as silk. She bustled off to the kitchen. I sat down. The familiar comfort of the worn leather did nothing to soothe me. It felt like I was sinking into a trap. I looked around the room, my living room. The photos on the mantelpiece caught my eye. Me and Helen on our wedding day. Mark as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, proudly holding up a fish he'd caught. The three of us on a family vacation, squinting in the sun. A lifetime of memories, all contained within these 4 walls. And they wanted to take it, not just the money. The word Lily used was simple, a child's word. But its meaning was vast. They wanted to take my security, my independence, my home, my life. Sarah returned with a glass of water, placing it on the coaster on the side table. Her hand lingered near my shoulder for a moment. A gesture of affection, a show of care. It felt like the touch of a spider. There you go, Arthur, she said softly. I took a sip of water. My hand was shaking slightly, and I gripped the glass with both hands to steady it. I had to stay calm. I had to listen. I had to understand the full scope of their plan before I could figure out what to do. My smile remained fixed in place. So, I said, my voice surprisingly even. Sarah mentioned you had a plan you wanted to discuss, a wonderful plan. Mark pulled an ottoman over and sat down in front of me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He adopted his serious, professional face, the one he probably used with his clients when he was about to sell them something. Dad, we've been worried about you, he began. The classic opening, the invocation of concern. This is a big house for one person. The upkeep, the taxes, the bills. It's a lot to manage. And your finances. It's a different world now. It's all online. It's complex. It's easy for people, especially seniors, to get taken advantage of. Oh, the irony. It was so thick, so potent. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. I swallowed it down, hard. I just nodded slowly, my face a mask of thoughtful consideration. I see. We love you, Dad, Sarah said, perching on the arm of the sofa nearby. And we just want to make sure you're safe and secure for the rest of your years. We want you to be able to relax, to enjoy your retirement without having to worry about a single thing. Here it comes, I thought. The pitch. So, we've been doing some research, Mark continued, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. And we've found the most incredible place. It's called The Willows. It's more like a resort than a retirement community. They have a golf course, a swimming pool, chef-prepared meals, round-the-clock medical staff. It's beautiful, Dad. You'd have your own lovely apartment, but no chores, no worries, just living. He was selling it like a timeshare, the pre-packaged dream. My house, this house that held every memory that mattered to me, was being dismissed as a lot to manage. My life was being reduced to a set of problems they could solve. And what about this house? I asked, my voice quiet. Mark and Sarah exchanged a quick glance. It was the glance I had seen earlier, the one that said, "We're on the same page. The plan is working." "Well, that's the best part," Mark said, leaning in closer. "The market is incredible right now. We could sell the house for a very good price. A fantastic price, actually. That money, combined with your savings and investments, it would more than cover the cost of the Willows for the rest of your life. In fact, there would be a good amount left over." "Left over for what?" I asked. "Well, for managing your expenses, of course," Sarah chimed in smoothly. "Mark is a professional. He could invest the remainder for you, make it grow. He would handle all your bills, your entrance fee for the Willows, everything. You wouldn't have to write a single check. He would manage it all for you as your power of attorney." Power of attorney. The final nail. The legal term that would strip me of all control. They wouldn't be taking my money with a gun. They'd be taking it with a pen, with my own signature on a piece of paper. Lily's childish phrase, "take your money," was devastatingly accurate. They wanted to liquidate my entire life, my home, my savings, the nest egg Helen and I had painstakingly built over 5 decades of hard work and careful saving, and put it all under Mark's control. I felt a profound, bottomless sadness wash over me. This was my son, my boy, the one I had taught to ride a bike, the one whose scraped knees I had patched. And he was sitting here, with his wife, calmly and rationally explaining how they intended to erase me from my own life for their financial gain. The red letter, the final notice, it all made sense now. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. They had dug themselves into a hole so deep that they were willing to bury their own father to get out of it. I looked at Mark, really looked at him. I saw the faint lines of stress around his eyes, the way his smile didn't quite banish the tension in his jaw. He wasn't a monster. He was a weak man. A weak man who had made terrible choices and was now trying to take the easy way out, no matter the cost to anyone else. And that, I realized, was somehow worse. I needed to buy time. I couldn't just explode. I couldn't reveal that I knew. That would be messy, and Lily would somehow get caught in the middle of it. They would know she had told me. I couldn't let that happen. I had to be smarter than them. I had to play their game. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. I let my shoulders slump. I made my face look tired, confused, overwhelmed. I was an actor now, too, and my performance had to be flawless. That's a lot to take in, I said, shaking my head slowly. Power of attorney. Selling the house. Helen loved this house so much. I let my voice trail off, letting the grief and sentiment hang in the air. It was real grief, but I was using it as a tool. The thought made me feel sick. Sarah's face softened with false sympathy. "I know, Arthur. We know. But think of the new friends you'll make, the activities. You won't be lonely anymore." "You think I'm lonely?" I asked, looking up at her. "Well, of course, dear. It's only natural," she said, her voice dripping with pity. It was the final insult. They were using my love for my late wife, my quiet life, as weapons against me. They were defining my existence as a sad, lonely, burdensome thing that they, in their infinite kindness, would fix. It all sounds so complicated, I said, rubbing my temples. All the paperwork, lawyers, I suppose. "Don't you worry about a thing, Dad," Mark said, his voice full of confidence now. He thought he had me. He saw my weariness as surrender. "I've already spoken to our lawyer. He's drawn up all the necessary documents. The power of attorney, the property transfer agreements. He said it's all very standard. We can go to his office on Monday morning and sign everything. It'll be quick and painless. By Monday afternoon, your worries will be over. Monday morning, 2 days from now. The speed of it, the efficiency, was chilling. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. My birthday party wasn't a celebration. It was the starting pistol for the final sprint. I had to give them an answer. I had to give them the answer they wanted to hear. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. I looked from Mark's eager face to Sarah's smugly compassionate one. I let the silence stretch out, filling the room with their anticipation. Then I gave a small, defeated nod. "You know," I said, my voice a quiet murmur. "You might be right. I am tired. It is a big house." I looked around the room one last time, as if saying goodbye. "If you think this is what's best, if you'll handle everything, then I suppose we can do it." The relief that washed over their faces was instantaneous and profound. It was like a physical wave. Mark's shoulders relaxed, and a genuine, triumphant smile spread across his face. Sarah's eyes lit up, and she clasped her hands together. "Oh, Dad, Arthur, I'm so glad you're being so sensible about this," Mark exclaimed, his voice booming in the quiet room. "You won't regret it. This is the start of a wonderful new chapter for you. We'll take such good care of you," Sarah added, her voice thick with fake emotion. "And of everything." I just nodded, unable to speak. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean by betrayal. But beneath the emptiness, a tiny, hard kernel of something else was forming. Resolve. Cold, hard, diamond-sharp resolve. They thought they had won. They thought their doddering old father had finally given in. They had no idea what was coming. I had smiled when Lily whispered her warning. I had smiled when they laid out their treacherous plan. And I was still smiling now, a tired, sad, broken smile. But on the inside, I was no longer the victim in their play. I was the director, and I had until Monday morning to plan a new final scene, one they would never see coming. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep was an impossible luxury, a distant country I couldn't reach. After Mark and Sarah finally left, their faces beaming with success, their goodbyes full of promises to call in the morning to confirm the lawyer's appointment, the house fell into a silence that was deeper and more absolute than any I had ever known. Lily was asleep in the guest room upstairs. I checked on her, my heart aching. She was curled up under the quilt, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. She was the reason I had to do this. She was the one pure thing I had to protect. I went back downstairs and sat in my armchair, the stage for my earlier surrender. The room was dark, save for the moonlight slanting through the windows. For hours I just sat there, a statue carved from grief and fury. The shock was beginning to wear off, replaced by a cold, clear anger. It wasn't a hot, explosive rage, but a slow-burning, methodical one. It was the kind of anger that fuels you, that clarifies your thoughts and hardens your will. My whole life, I had believed in a few simple truths. Work hard, be honest, love your family, and leave things better than you found them. I had built my world on that foundation, and in the space of a few hours, my own son had taken a sledgehammer to it. He and his wife hadn't just plotted to take my money. They had tried to steal my dignity, to rewrite my life as a story of incompetence and loneliness that only they could save me from. They had used my love and trust as leverage. The first gray light of dawn found me still in the chair. My body ached with a weariness that went far beyond lack of sleep. It was the ache of a broken heart, but my mind was sharp. The initial chaos of my thoughts had settled into a single, unshakable purpose. I was not going to the Willows. I was not signing any power of attorney. And I was not going to let them destroy themselves and tarnish the family name without a fight. This wasn't just about saving my money anymore. It was about saving them from their own catastrophic weakness, even if they would hate me for it. As soon as it was a respectable hour, 7:30 on a Sunday morning, I made my first call. Not to a lawyer, not yet. I called my sister-in-law, Carol, Helen's younger sister. Carol was a retired high school principal. She was sharp as a tack, pragmatic, and had never been fully charmed by Sarah's sweet act or Mark's slick confidence. She lived 2 towns over. Her voice was groggy when she answered. "Arthur, is everything okay? It's early." "I'm fine, Carol, but I need your help. Can you come over? It's important." The seriousness in my tone must have cut through her sleepiness. "I'll be there in an hour," she said, no more questions asked. While I waited, I made coffee and went to my workshop. I wasn't planning on working, but I needed to be in a place that felt wholly mine, untouched by their scheming. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool surface of my table saw. I thought about the thousands of hours I had spent here, turning rough lumber into things of purpose and beauty. It was a place of creation, of order. The perfect antidote to the chaos they had unleashed in my life. When Carol arrived, I let her in and saw the concern on her face. She was a tall, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes that missed nothing. "Arthur, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, taking off her coat. "Worse," I said. "I've seen the truth." We sat at the kitchen table, the one where Helen and I had shared thousands of meals. I poured her a cup of coffee, and then I told her everything. I started with the red final notice I'd found. I told her about their odd behavior, the questions about my finances. I told her about the party, the calculated display of affection. And then, my voice cracking for the first time, I told her what Lily had whispered to me. Carol listened without interrupting, her expression growing harder and colder with every word. When I finished with their wonderful plan to ship me off to the Willows and take control of everything, she slammed her coffee cup down on the table, making the spoons jump. "Those greedy, short-sighted, ungrateful fools," she hissed, her voice low and furious. I knew it. I always knew there was something off about the way they lived. That massive house, the fancy cars. It never added up. Helen would be heartbroken. She would be furious. I corrected her gently, and she would know exactly what to do. "Well, she's not here, Arthur." "But I am," Carol said, her eyes flashing. "So, what are we going to do? You can't go to that lawyer's office tomorrow. We'll call them and tell them the deal is off." "No," I said slowly, the plan that had been forming in the dark hours of the morning finally taking shape. "No, that's not enough. If I just say no, they'll know Lily told me. They'll be angry with her, and they'll just find another way. They'll try to have me declared incompetent. They'll harass me. They're desperate, Carol. This can't be a simple refusal. It has to be a final, undeniable checkmate." Carol looked at me, her head tilted. "What are you thinking, Arthur?" "I'm going to that lawyer's office tomorrow," I said, "and I'm going to need you there with me. And Lily." "Lily?" "Arthur, why would you put her in the middle of this?" "Because she's already in the middle of it. She's the one who was brave enough to tell me the truth. And she needs to see that telling the truth has positive consequences, that it leads to protection, not punishment. But more than that, her presence will change the dynamic. It will remind Mark that he's not just a businessman closing a deal. He's a father. My second call was to my lawyer. Not their lawyer, but mine, Mr. Davison. He had handled our wills 30 years ago, a decent, old-school man who believed in trust and integrity. He was semi-retired, but he took my call at home. I explained the situation, the urgency. It's elder abuse, plain and simple, Arthur, he said, his voice grim. And it's more common than you think. The power of attorney document is the key. Do not sign it under any circumstances. I have no intention of signing it, George, I said. But I have another idea. I want you to meet me at their lawyer's office tomorrow morning. I want you to be my counsel, and I need you to draw up some documents for me. Tonight. I spent the next hour on the phone with Mr. Davison, laying out my counterplan. It was audacious. It was theatrical. And it was, I believed, the only way. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Arthur, he said finally, a note of admiration in his voice. It's a masterstroke. It's fair, it's legally sound, and it's going to hit them like a ton of bricks. I'll have everything ready. I'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Henderson and Cole, 3rd floor, right? That's the one, I said. After he hung up, I felt a sense of calm settle over me for the first time in 2 days. I had a plan. I had allies. I was no longer a victim waiting for the axe to fall. I was a man taking control of his own destiny. Carol stayed with me for the rest of the day. Her presence was a silent, solid support. We woke Lily up gently and explained that she was going to spend the day with Grandpa and Great-Aunt Carol. The little girl was relieved, her face losing the pinched, worried look it had worn since the party. We didn't mention the talk or her parents. We just made it a fun day. We went to the park. We got ice cream. I pushed her on the swings, higher and higher, her laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. For those few hours, I could almost forget what was waiting for me the next day. I watched Lily, so full of life and joy, and I knew I was doing the right thing. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting her future from the poison of her parents' greed and desperation. It was about preserving the one thing of value that I could truly pass on, a legacy of integrity. That evening, Mark called, his voice oozing false concern. Hey, Dad, just checking in. How are you feeling today? Rested up? A bit tired, I said, playing my part. It was a big day. Well, you'll be able to rest for good soon, he said cheerfully. Just wanted to confirm for tomorrow. 10 a.m. at Henderson and Cole. Sarah and I will pick you up at 9:30. That's all right, son, I said, keeping my voice frail. My neighbor is giving me a ride into town anyway for an appointment. I'll just meet you there. My sister-in-law, Carol, is going to come with me. For support, you know. My head's a bit jumbled with all this. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him calculating. Carol's presence was an unexpected variable, but my excuse of being jumbled and needing support would make it seem harmless. Oh, okay, Dad, if you're sure. We'll see you and Carol there at 10. He hung up. The final piece was in place. They would walk into that conference room, expecting a frail old man and his equally befuddled sister-in-law. They would be anticipating a quick, clean victory. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush of truth. Monday morning dawned gray and overcast, the sky the color of slate. It suited my mood perfectly. There was a solemnity to the air, a sense of gravity. This was the day. I dressed carefully, not in the clothes of a man being put out to pasture, but in the suit I had worn to Helen's funeral. It was a dark, conservative gray, a suit of substance and seriousness. It felt like armor. Carol arrived at 8:30 with Lily. Carol was also dressed formally, in a navy blue dress that made her look even more like the formidable principal she once was. Lily was in a simple dress, her hair neatly brushed. She held my hand, her small fingers a warm anchor in the cold sea of my anxiety. She didn't know the details of what was about to happen, only that she needed to be with me, and she was brave. "Are you ready for this, Arthur?" Carol asked, her gaze steady. I took a deep breath. "No," I said honestly, "but it has to be done." We didn't take my neighbor's car. We took Carol's. The ride into the city was mostly silent. I watched the familiar landscape roll by, the trees just beginning to turn, their leaves tinged with yellow and red. It was a beautiful, ordinary day for something so monumental. My mind wasn't on the scenery, though. It was on the task ahead. I rehearsed my opening lines in my head, the key points I needed to make. I felt a strange sense of calm descend, the kind that comes when you've accepted a difficult course of action and there's no turning back. The law offices of Henderson and Cole were in a modern glass and steel building downtown. It was the kind of place designed to project power and wealth, all polished marble floors and expensive, uncomfortable-looking art. It was Mark and Sarah's world, not mine. We rode the elevator up to the third floor in silence. The doors opened onto a hushed, carpeted reception area. A young woman at a large, imposing desk looked up. "We're here to see Mr. Henderson," Carol said, her voice crisp and clear. "We have a 10 o'clock appointment. Arthur Weatherby." "Of course," the receptionist said, her smile professional and distant. "They're waiting for you in conference room B, down the hall to your right." My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. I took Lily's hand, squeezed it gently, and we walked down the hall. The door to conference room B was slightly ajar. I could hear Mark's confident baritone and Sarah's lighter laugh. I pushed the door open. They were sitting at one side of a long, polished mahogany table. Mark, Sarah, and a slick-looking man in a pinstripe suit who I assumed was Mr. Henderson. They all looked up as we entered, their faces wreathed in welcoming smile. The smiles faltered slightly when they saw who was with me. Not just Carol, but also Mr. Davison, my lawyer, who had been waiting for us down the hall and entered right behind us. And Lily, holding my hand like a lifeline. "Dad," Mark said, recovering quickly. "And Carol, good to see you. And, Mr. Davison, I don't think we were expecting you." "Mr. Weatherby is my client," Mr. Davison said, his voice calm and firm. He placed his briefcase on the table with a solid thud. "I'm here to advise him. We can sit on this side, Arthur." We took our seats on the opposite side of the table. The room was suddenly divided, two opposing camps across a polished wooden battlefield. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Mark and Sarah exchanged a confused, worried glance. Their smooth, easy plan had just hit a significant bump. Mr. Henderson, their lawyer, cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Well, this is unexpected, but certainly Mr. Weatherby is entitled to his own counsel. Shall we begin?" "I have the documents we discussed right here, Mark. The durable power of attorney and the real estate transfer forms for the sale of the primary residence." He slid a thick stack of papers across the table. They stopped in the no-man's land between our two parties. Mark leaned forward, his professional smile back in place, though it looked strained now. "Dad, this is just a formality. As we discussed, this is all to make your life easier. Mr. Davison, I'm sure you'll see that these are very standard agreements." "I'm sure I will," Mr. Davison said dryly. "However, before we look at any of your documents, Mr. Henderson, My client has a statement he would like to make. All eyes turned to me. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. This was my moment. I looked across the table, not with anger, but with a profound and heavy sadness. I looked at my son. "Mark," I began, my voice steady. "Before we talk about these papers, I want to talk about value. Not monetary value, real value." I paused, letting the words sink in. Mark looked confused. "When you were a boy," I continued, "I taught you how to build a bookshelf. Do you remember that? In the workshop. I told you to measure twice and cut once. I told you that the strength of the shelf wasn't just in the wood, but in the joints, in how the pieces fit together. That's value. It's the care, the work, the integrity you put into something." I looked around the sterile conference room. This is just paper. The house you want to sell, the money you want to manage. You see it as a pile of assets, a number on a spreadsheet. But to me, it's not. It's the floorboards Helen and I danced on in the kitchen. It's the mark on the door frame where we measured your height every year. It's 52 years of a life, built piece by piece, with care and with love. That's its value, and it's not for sale. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mark's face had lost its smile completely. It was a blank mask of disbelief. "Dad, what are you talking about?" he said, his voice tight. "We're trying to help you." "No, son," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. "You're trying to help yourselves. I know about the debt. I know you're in trouble." The color drained from Mark's face. Sarah gasped, a tiny, choked sound. They looked at each other in naked panic. Their secret was out. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mark stammered, but his eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. "Don't you, Mark?" Mr. Davison said, his voice cutting in sharply. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a printout. "My associate did a little public record search this morning. It's amazing what you can find online. It seems a certain financial services company has a lien against your property for a rather substantial amount. And there are several other outstanding judgments as well. It looks like you're not as successful as you pretend to be." Mark stared at the paper as if it were a snake. The pinstriped lawyer, Mr. Henderson, looked from the paper to his clients, his expression morphing from slick confidence to professional alarm. He was realizing, I think, that he had been lied to as well. "So, you see," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "this isn't about my well-being. It's about a bailout. You were going to sell my life to pay off your mistakes. You were going to put me in a home, take everything my wife and I worked for, and use it to patch the holes in your sinking ship. And you were going to do it by convincing me I was old and helpless and a burden." I let the accusation hang in the silent room. The truth was out, stark and ugly, laid bare on the polished mahogany table. There was nowhere for them to hide. Then I did something they never expected. I reached across the table and pushed the stack of their legal documents back towards them. "I will not be signing these," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "Not today. Not ever." And then I looked at my own lawyer. "Mr. Davison, I believe you have some documents for us to review instead." Mr. Davison smiled, a thin, grim smile. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a different folder. A folder that contained my plan, my terms, my new reality. The shock on Mark and Sarah's faces was absolute. They had walked in expecting a surrender, and instead, they had walked into a coup. They were utterly, completely stunned. And we were just getting started. The silence in the conference room was a living thing. It was thick with the wreckage of Mark and Sarah's plan, with their shock and shame. Mr. Henderson, their lawyer, was staring at my son with an expression of profound disappointment, as if discovering a prize racehorse was actually a donkey. Mark was pale, his jaw working silently. Sarah had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horror that was, for the first time, genuine. Mr. Davison slid his folder into the center of the table. It was a simple manila folder, but it felt like it had the weight of a gravestone. As my client stated, Mr. Davison said, his professional voice cutting through the tension, we will not be entertaining your proposal. Instead, Mr. Weatherby has prepared his own. We can call it the Family Integrity Plan. The name was Carol's idea. It was perfect, just the right amount of righteous sting. This is ridiculous, Mark finally managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. Dad, you don't understand the complexities? Oh, I think I understand them perfectly, son, I said, my voice softer now. The anger had burned away, leaving only a deep, aching sorrow. I understand that you are in a deep financial hole. I understand that you have been hiding it from everyone. And I understand that you saw me not as your father, but as your solution. I paused, then added, what I don't understand is how you thought you could get away with it. I looked over at Lily, who was sitting quietly between me and Carol, absorbing the tension in the room with the wide, serious eyes of a child. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Let's talk about my plan, I said, turning my attention back to Mark and Sarah. Mr. Davison, if you would. My lawyer opened the folder. It's quite straightforward, he began. First, regarding Mr. Weatherby's assets. Effective this morning, my client has placed his home, his savings, and all of his investments into an irrevocable trust. A what? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. An irrevocable trust, Mr. Davison repeated patiently. It means the assets belong to the trust, not to Mr. Weatherby personally. He is the primary beneficiary for his lifetime, of course. But he cannot be coerced or tricked into giving them away. The assets are protected, permanently. Mark's head snapped up. Who's the trustee? Who controls it? He demanded. The financial advisor in him was instantly trying to find a loophole, an angle to work. An excellent question, Mr. Davison said. The trust will be managed by a 3-person board. The first trustee is Mr. Weatherby himself. The second is his sister-in-law, Ms. Carol Benson. He nodded towards Carol, who gave a firm, resolute nod back. And the third trustee is a neutral third party, an independent financial fiduciary from my firm. Any major decision regarding the trust's assets requires a majority vote. So, 2 out of the 3 trustees must agree. The genius of it settled over the room. I had locked down my entire life's work. It was safe, managed by a team that included my own sound mind, a fiercely loyal ally, and an impartial professional. It was untouchable. Mark slumped back in his chair, as if he'd been physically struck. The bailout was gone. The easy money had vanished. But that's just the first part of the plan, I said, picking up the narrative. This isn't about punishing you. It's about helping you, whether you deserve it or not. They both looked at me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning dread. Mr. Davison pulled out another document. The trust has been instructed to do 2 things for your benefit, Mark and Sarah. First, it will pay off your outstanding, verified consumer debts and the lien against your house. A flicker of hope appeared in Sarah's eyes. a lifeline. But it was immediately extinguished by Mr. Davison's next words. However, this is not a gift. It is a loan, a formal, interest-free loan from the trust with a strict repayment schedule. You will pay it all back. Second, and this is non-negotiable, the trust will pay for you to attend mandatory, intensive financial counseling and therapy. With a counselor approved by the trustees, you will provide proof of attendance and progress reports to the board. Your access to the loan is contingent upon your full and honest participation in this program. It was a complete reordering of their lives. I wasn't just solving their immediate problem. I was forcing them to confront the behavior that had caused it. I was giving them a hand up, but on my terms, not theirs. It was a path to solvency, but it was a hard path, paved with humility and accountability. You want us to go to therapy? Sarah whispered, as if the idea were the most insulting thing she had ever heard. I want you to get well, I said simply. You are sick with something. A sickness of wanting more, of living a lie. It's poisoning you, and it's going to poison your daughter if you don't stop it. This is your chance to get better. And then came the final piece of the plan, the part that was for me and for Helen. As for this house, I said, my voice filled with emotion, my house. It will remain my home for as long as I live. I will live there, and I will die there. And upon my death, the trust is instructed to donate the house and the property in its entirety to the city's historical society, to be preserved as the Helen and Arthur Weatherby Heritage Home, a small museum of a simpler time, a place where things were built to last. This was the part that truly broke them. It wasn't about the money. It was about the legacy. They had always assumed the house, the biggest single asset, would one day be theirs. It was the ultimate prize at the end of the game. And I had just taken it off the board forever. I was ensuring that my home would be used for public good, not to fund their lavish lifestyle. Sarah finally broke. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. Not the soft, manipulative tears I had seen before, but harsh, ragged gulps of despair. Mark just sat there, his face ashen, staring at the polished table as if seeing his entire future dissolve into its reflective surface. There was one last piece of business. I turned to Lily. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the little bluebird I had carved for her. I placed it in her hand. There's one more part of the trust, Sweet Pea, I said softly, so only she and Carol could really hear. It's called the Lily Fund. A portion of the trust's earnings every single year goes into a special account that no one can touch but you. Not me, not your mom and dad. No one. It's for your education, for your first house, for your future. It will be waiting for you when you're a grown-up. It's my real legacy. It's for you. I looked back at my son. You wanted to secure my future. Instead, I've secured hers. From you. The finality of my words hung in the air. Their plot was in ruins. Their financial desperation was exposed. Their future was now a long, hard road of repayment and forced humility. And my legacy, my home, my life's work, was protected, preserved, and directed toward the one person in the room whose heart was pure. Their lawyer, Mr. Henderson, quietly gathered his papers. He looked at Mark and Sarah with undisguised contempt. My professional advice, he said coolly, is to accept the terms. It's the most generous offer you're ever going to get. He stood up. If you'll excuse me, I believe my services here are no longer required. And with that, he walked out of the room, abandoning his clients to the wreckage they had created. The room was quiet again, except for Sarah's muffled sobs. Mark wouldn't look at me. He couldn't. I had not only defeated him, I had laid his soul bare. I had shown him exactly who he had become. And it was an ugly sight. I stood up, my old knees cracking a protest. I felt 100 years old, and yet lighter than I had in months. The weight was gone. "The choice is yours, Mark," I said quietly. "You can accept the help and start the long road back to being a man your daughter can be proud of. Or you can refuse and declare bankruptcy and lose everything anyway. The trust will be there either way." Carol and Mr. Davison stood up with me. I took Lily's hand, and we walked towards the door, leaving my son and daughter-in-law sitting alone at that big, empty table, with nothing but the consequences of their own actions for company. We didn't look back. Walking out of that conference room was like stepping out of a pressurized cabin into the open air. I took a deep, shuddering breath as the elevator doors closed, leaving the scene of the demolition behind us. The air inside the small metal box felt clean, fresh. I was exhausted down to my very bones, but it was the clean exhaustion of a hard day's labor, not the toxic fatigue of anxiety and dread. I looked at Carol, and she gave me a small, weary smile of solidarity. I looked at Mr. Davison, who nodded with professional satisfaction. And I looked down at Lily. She was looking up at me, her brow furrowed with the effort of trying to understand the adult storm that had just broken around her. She didn't grasp the specifics of trusts or power of attorney, but she understood the important things. She understood that her grandfather had been in trouble, that her parents had done something wrong, and that now somehow things were safe again. "Is it over, Grandpa?" she asked, her voice small in the quiet elevator. "Yes, sweet pea," I said, my voice thick. "It's over." I squeezed her hand. "You were very brave today. Thank you." She just nodded and leaned against my leg, her unspoken trust a balm on my wounded heart. We walked out of the sterile office building into the gray, midday light. The city was bustling around us, people rushing to lunch, cars honking, the normal rhythm of life completely oblivious to the family drama that had just unfolded on the third floor. It was a humbling reminder that my world, which had felt so titanic and all-consuming, was just one small story among millions. Mr. Davison shook my hand firmly on the sidewalk. "Arthur, you handled that with more grace and strength than most men could muster. If you need anything at all, you call me." "Thank you, George," I said, "for everything. You were a rock in there." He tipped his hat to Carol and Lily and walked off down the street, a man secure in a job well done. Carol drove us home. The ride was as quiet as the one on the way in, but the silence was different. It was a silence of peace, of resolution. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her head lolling against the window, the carved bluebird still clutched in her hand. "What do you think they'll do?" Carol asked softly, her eyes on the road. I watched the scenery go by. "I think eventually they'll take the deal. They have no other choice. Pride is a luxury they can no longer afford. Whether they learn anything from it, that's up to them." I thought about Mark's ashen face, the utter defeat in his eyes. There was no triumph in me, no sense of victory. I had won, yes, but what had I won? The confirmation that my own son would betray me for money, the necessity of shattering his life to save it. It was a bitter, sorrowful victory. I felt like a general who had won a war on his own soil, surveying the damage to his own land and his own people. When we got back to my house, the world felt blessedly normal. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood greeted us like a friend. The grandfather clock ticked its steady, reassuring rhythm in the hall. It was my sanctuary again. It was safe. Carol helped me carry the sleeping Lily inside and put her to bed in the guest room for a nap. Then she made us a pot of tea, and we sat at the kitchen table just as we had the day before. But today, the anxiety was gone, replaced by a profound sense of finality. "Helen would be proud of you, Arthur," Carol said, looking at me over the rim of her teacup. She would have hated the reason for it, but she would have been so proud of how you handled it. Tears pricked my eyes. I just kept thinking about what she would say. "Stand up straight and tell the truth," she always used to say, "even if your voice shakes." My voice had shaken, but I had stood up. The next few days were quiet. I didn't hear from Mark or Sarah, and I didn't expect to. The silence was a relief. I spent my time in the workshop, the familiar motions of sawing and sanding a form of therapy. I fixed a wobbly leg on a kitchen chair. I repaired a birdhouse that had been damaged in a storm. I put my world back in order, one small, tangible piece at a time. About a week later, I received a formal letter from a different lawyer. It stated that Mark and Sarah Weatherby accepted the terms of the loan and the conditions laid out by the trust. Enclosed was the first signed attendance slip from a financial counseling center. It was a sterile, impersonal communication, but it was a beginning. A long, hard road stretched out in front of them, but they had taken the first step. Whether they took it out of genuine remorse or sheer lack of options, I didn't know. And perhaps it didn't matter. The first step is still the first step, no matter the motivation. Life settled into a new kind of normal, a quieter normal. Carol and I arranged for me to see Lily every weekend. Her parents dropped her off at the end of the driveway, quick, awkward handovers with few words exchanged. The warmth was gone from our interactions, replaced by a formal, bruised courtesy. I knew that my relationship with my son might never recover, that the wound was likely too deep to ever fully heal. And I had to learn to live with that. Some things, once broken, can't be perfectly mended. You just learn to live with the cracks. But my relationship with Lily blossomed. With the poison of her parents' influence held at bay, she and I rediscovered the simple joy of being together. We worked in the garden. I taught her the names of the birds that came to the feeder. We baked cookies in Helen's old kitchen, filling the house with the smell of sugar and vanilla. In her, I saw the future. I saw the legacy of love and integrity that I had fought to protect. I had secured her future, and in doing so, I had secured my own peace of mind. I still live in my house. It's quiet here, but it's no longer a lonely quiet. It's a peaceful quiet, filled with the ghosts of good memories and the promise of more to come. Sometimes, I sit in my old leather armchair in the evening and look at the photos on the mantelpiece. I see Mark as that gap-toothed boy, and my heart aches for the man he failed to become. But then I look at the drawing Lily made for my 80th birthday, the one taped to the wall, with its lopsided cake and its declaration of love. And I know I did the right thing. I chose the hard path. I chose the truth. I chose love, the real kind, the kind that builds things to last.